All right, so for this week's project, we're going to be returning to a viewer-submitted unit. This is a Pioneer standalone AM/FM stereo tuner, model TX-608, and this comes from Craig. He lives in Texas. He got in touch with me, inquiring about this unit. Says that it's been in storage for quite a while, and he would like to put this back into some sort of semi-daily use in the upcoming future, and asked me if I would be willing to take a look at this and make sure everything is working correctly on it. And just having a look at this thing from the front, absolute museum quality. This thing does not have a scratch on it. And I believe he did mention that he has the integrated amp that goes with this as well. So not a lot to look at as far as controls on the front of this, so we'll probably go ahead and skip all of that and get it opened up and see if we can confirm if everything is working correctly. Just based on what I'm seeing from the outside, I'd be surprised if there's anything going on with this, but we will look for anything obvious and make a few checks through the circuitry to make sure we don't have any kind of an issue with any stress capacitors in the power supply or anything in the IF section that might be an issue. So we'll come back in and see what we can find out for him. Our intro music this week, we're going back to 1977, checking out Pink Floyd's masterpiece, Animals. And pretty much any song on this could be the best song on it, but we're gonna listen to one of my favorites, and this one's called Pigs. So we'll check out a little bit of this, and then we'll get started on the Pioneer. All right, so as I bring you back in, I went ahead and got the unit plugged in. All of the indicator lamps, all that's working just fine. Went ahead and routed it over to the mixer so we can get a good idea of what the audio should sound like without it being forced through a microphone. And what we're gonna do here is nothing super scientific. We're gonna go from the left side of the scale all the way to the right side of the scale, hitting all the stations that's in my area. And I believe there's probably only going to be a couple, maybe three, that's going to be a really strong signal. I don't get great reception in this garage anyway, but FM is way better than AM, and AM is another thing that we'll be addressing a little differently than normal. Antenna-wise, we're going to use just a single jumper clip that I have hooked onto one of the 300 ohm terminals in the back. Currently have the unit in mute mode. So we'll start off muting, and we'll work our way across the dial and see what we can hit.
Danae, you probably have a stated guaranteed return on those annuities unless you're in a variable annuity that's going to be a...
And some of these stations, I realize, will have a little bit of interference involved in them. That is not an issue with the tuner. I can assure you it is an issue with the reception that I get in this garage.
All businesses and nonprofits stay connected and do more business.
Yeah.
Visit or in person.
Because I could give a flimsy answer and move on, but
it don't matter if you're black or blacksmith and the artist reflected in their art. To show you my weakness.
Getting you from Moline to Iowa City with 100 minutes of non-stop hit music.
I come back stronger than a 90s strand. Wait for the signal.
Now, as we get down towards this part of the scale, there's a couple of really strong stations very close by. One is a country station. We should see it peg up into the 100%. And another is a classic rock station around 106.
Text the word BYOP to 611611 to see if your phone's compatible. Simple Mobile. Out with the old, in with
You can make. You.
Could have tripped out TC, but I've changed my ways.
And that's pretty much it as far as FM is concerned. This thing hit pretty much every station the bench receiver will hit. It did a lot better job on some of them than the bench receiver will do, and the bench receiver has a much better antenna than just a jumper lead hooked to it. And I'm sure the reception of this would be much better if it was moved to a different part of the room with a proper dipole antenna. But we're just doing a quick check here based on what I know and how it should perform with the stations in the area and the location of where it's sitting in this garage. So I think we're good on that. We'll leave FM alone for now. I've had a chance to take a look at the service manual for this. It's actually a very simple, very small service manual. And we will take a look at that for AM, because AM poses a lot of challenges because the reception for AM in this garage is shitty. And it doesn't make any difference where you put it, where you move it to. For whatever reason, it just isn't that good. So at best, we're probably going to be able to get two stations, one moderately strong, the other one faint. And that is the way it is no matter what receiver you bring in here. It can be this, it can be a cheap AM radio, it can be a Grundig radio, it can be whatever you bring in here. That's just kind of how it is. So we're going to utilize the service manual for testing AM and the signal generator just to make sure we got things tuned in, just because I can't tell about AM based on the listening test alone and going across the dial, because there just isn't anything there. It doesn't pick anything up, and that's not an issue with the tuner. It's just an issue with the location of where I'm at. So we'll come back. We're going to set a few things up for that. I'll bring you back and show you how we're going to do that, and we'll take a look at his AM. So give me a moment for that, and we'll pick back up. All right, so I'm picking back up with you. We're kind of in twilight mode here. I went ahead and killed all the overhead fluorescent lights. Those are yet another hindrance to AM reception in this garage, among other things. And I thought we'd just go ahead and scan across the scale here, and I'll show you what I discovered in the initial testing before I started the video. And I was pleasantly surprised at how much this thing will receive in this garage. It's done better than probably the last 2 or 3 receivers I've had in here messing around with on AM. But we'll go ahead and we'll start the scale over on the right hand side, and we'll work our way to the left hand side. So give me a second here, and I'm going to mute my microphone.
iHeartRadio is giving you your very own station. Favorites Radio plays nothing but the songs you've thumbed up and listened to.
Places are going to be dominoes falling. All of a sudden, Stafford's going to go somewhere, and the 49ers are going to do something, and the Rams are going to do something. It's going to...
I'm definitely never the smartest in the room, unless I'm with, like, my niece, and that's debatable, too. But, you know, I hop on Zoom calls all the...
Dead people rise from the dead, and miracles performed in front of my eyes. I saw Jesus do those things. I
had to put college on hold, but today, I'm cancer-free, thanks to...
My house growing up, we had NFL tickets, like early, and I watched
I get an occasional shot. I'll feel better because I'll feel better.
Well, you know, you're here.
So I think that's about as good as it would get for any receiver in here for AM. That picked up way more stations than, like I said, the last few I've been messing around with. I didn't really pay that much close attention to AM with the other ones because, in particular, they didn't have problems or the customer wasn't complaining about issues with AM. I'll always do a quick check just to make sure it'll pick up the strong stations, but I never really focused that much attention on it. So maybe the other ones actually would do this, I don't know, but from what I can remember, this has been the first receiver or tuner that's been here in a while that could actually do a pretty good job on AM. Now, a lot of those stations were pretty fringe, and even maybe adjusting the antenna on the back could make an improvement, or adding an additional external antenna may have made a pretty big improvement. But I'd have to say this is pretty impressive for my garage. But I think we'll go ahead and pull the service manual. Let's go ahead and take a look at the AM alignment procedure for that. We might be able to tweak it up just a little bit more to make sure we got the best possible reception we can get. And we'll do that. I'll get things set up for that, and I'll bring you back, and we'll have a look at the alignment and the manual for this. All right, so I'm picking back up with you. This is going to be day number 2. And we're going to take a look at the service manual for this, in particular the AM alignment portion of that. It's a very small section in a very small manual. But what they're going to tell us here is they want us to connect up the signal generator, do that through a 1K resistor to the antenna terminals on the back of the unit, put the dial pointer of the tuner 600 kilohertz, and set up the output of the generator to 600 kilohertz, 100 dB. But the modulation 400 hertz instead of the 1 kilohertz built into the generator, so we'll have to generate that externally. We'll do it with a laptop. And then it wants us to adjust the core of T3. And it says here to get the best signal on the signal meter, but we're going to do that using the scope. So let's take a look and see what we got going on here. So we got our signal generator. It's just an old manual one. No digital accuracy, so we're feeding a line down to the frequency counter so we can kind of dial in the frequency that we need. They want the 400 hertz instead of the 1 kilohertz tone built in, so we're supplying that through the external input, and we're bringing that out of the laptop. There's a test tone album on Spotify we'll use for the 400 hertz. And we're bringing a line down to our tuner. And we're using a 1K resistor just like they asked for. And then we're splitting our output. One line going to the mixer and then one line going over to the scope, and that's how we'll kind of tweak it. Now the coil they want you to tweak, or the core, is right there. So we'll try that and see. Let's go ahead and start our test tone up. And here is our scope pattern. We'll slow that down a little bit. And we're going to tweak on it just like they said. And I think we're going to wind up about where we started from. That seemed to already be pretty peaked in. So let's take a look. Let's pause the test tone. And let's take a look at the manual. And basically what we're going to do is repeat this process. It says you want to adjust the core of T3. Okay, yeah, we already did that part. Then tune to 1400 kilohertz. And that's going to be across the other end of the dial. And then from that point, you're going to adjust TC4, which is on the tuning capacitor. So I'm going to go ahead and get this set up for that, because it's kind of hard to adjust all of this with one hand and hold the camera. So give me a second. We'll get the tuner back to 1400, and we'll get the signal generator set to 1400, and we'll look at the test points that they want us to adjust to tweak that in. So give me a second for that. All right, so as we come back in, I went ahead and made the adjustment to the signal generator, directing that to 1400 kilohertz, and we're tracking the frequency with the frequency counter so we can kind of get us in the ballpark. I'm not sure we'd ever get it right on the money because this doesn't have digital accuracy, but we're definitely in the ballpark of where we need to be. Maintaining the same connection through the 1K resistor, and then all we did was just move the tuning dial down to 1400 on the scale. And all they're having you do here, the only thing different is that you're going to be adjusting on one of the screws in the tuning capacitor, which they have TC4, and that's going to be the first screw. Yeah, TC4 is the first screw. And so we'll tweak on that a little bit and see if we can make any improvements using the same tone. All right. Our scope's looking pretty good here. It's a pretty touchy adjustment, I'll say that. And I think we're going to wind up exactly where we started from. And it's a tuner that has been very meticulously cared for, obviously. Not very heavy hours on this, I would imagine, because everything seems to be, you know, pretty much just right on the money where it should be. So I think we're going to leave it alone at that. Let's go ahead and pause the test tone. I'm going to show you something, a couple other things in this manual. There is an adjustment here. There's a screw down in the core of the rod antenna. You can make some adjustments and try to further improve the sensitivity of this. I'm probably not going to do anything with that. I think I'm seeing enough here, plus based on the fact that this has definitely been the best receiving tuner that I've ever had in this garage, to my knowledge. Maybe the other ones were good as well, but this one has done an excellent job as far as receiving AM in this garage. So I think we'll probably leave that alone. Let's take a look at the FM section of this. You may be wondering, well, how come we didn't do anything into the FM? Well, here's why. We'll kind of go to the directions for that. And the way that they want you to do the FM, now of course we did an FM scan across the dial, and this thing was what I would consider to be as well as it can be for receiving stations in my area, even the ones that are kind of fringe. But we'll take a look at what they're saying for the adjustments here. It says the tuning coils in the FM front end do not have an adjustment core. Consequently, tracking adjustments at 90 megahertz are performed by regulating the gap between the rotor and the stator of the tuning capacitor. So basically what they want you to do is if you need to make any adjustments to this, you would make those right in this area by kind of tweaking on the metal of these plates of the tuning capacitor. Now, if this thing had horrible reception and I felt like that we could benefit from that, I would. But since we know from yesterday's testing of the FM that all of it seems to be good, we're not going to even mess with that. We'll leave it alone. We'd probably create more of a problem than we would, gain in sensitivity. So we'll leave it as is. So I think we're good on alignment. So I think the next thing we want to do, let's kind of evaluate some of the health of the capacitors of the unit. That's always a big area of focus for a lot of the people on the internet. Some of the experts always say just change every capacitor in the unit. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of get a good idea of the health of those using the ESR meter, and just kind of a good visual inspection too is not a bad idea. So give me a moment for that and I'll bring you back. All right, so I'm picking back up with you now. Went ahead and used my in-circuit ESR meter. First, went through every cap in the power supply section here. Didn't get anything that was even remotely on the radar of needing any further testing or replacement. Then just kind of spot checked all the other little sections. Everything else coming back pretty good. There was some that were a little lower in value, but nothing on the bar of absolutely bad and needs to be replaced. I did replace a 6.3 at 220 mic right here. And if you remember in the first part of the video, when we did a visual scan of this, we found that capacitor to be a little damaged physically. This is it right here. And you can clearly see, depending on how the camera will cooperate, that there is something misformed about it. Let me see if I can get you a little better shot of that. And it's not the jacket that's causing that issue. It's the whole body. It's kind of like it's pinched or something. So anyway, we knew we wanted to change this one just because of the way that it looked. But I thought this would make a great candidate for us to do a little further testing with. See what the health of that particular capacitor is. And capacitors are one of the most popular subjects that I get emails about. Mostly critical, to be quite honest, about why, when I'm working on something like this, do I not just replace all the capacitors in it, which seems to be the going trend in vintage electronics. And I would answer that question by saying that although I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that, I think that I basically just use my in-circuit tester as kind of a guide to certain areas of the piece of equipment. That, along with my nearly 30 years of experience in seeing particular capacitors in particular parts of the circuit fail, so I kind of know what to look for to begin with, all of it kind of as an average to give me an idea of the overall health of the capacitors. That based on the fact that the unit looks basically like it's not had a hard life. So there's a few factors I take into consideration. So even though I don't change every single capacitor in the unit, I always check certain clusters, certain circuits, looking for any telltale signs that we might want to change one here or change one there. And in some cases, in particular, camcorders made within the 80s or the 90s that have surface mount electrolytics in it, there's no question they all have to be changed because they're all probably leaking or have leaked. And if they haven't, they will. So in those cases, yes, I do say change all of them. But in something like this, it's not just a instantaneous, let's change them all. So what we'll do is we'll use this Syncor LC102Z meter as a second opinion for the capacitor in question here. I borrowed this piece of equipment from my friend's shop. And this one, you do have to put in some parameters of the capacitor in order to check it. So we'll do that now. We know it is an electrolytic. We'll have to put in the value, 220 mic, and the voltage, 6.3. And you also have a percentage here whether that be tolerance 10% or 20. I don't know what it is, so we're going to leave it blank. So that won't give us any wiggle room either way, good or bad. And then from this point, we have 4 tests we can run on the cap. We could do leakage, value, ESR to get a second opinion on this guy, and then one called dielectric absorption. I haven't really looked into that, so I don't really know what that is, but we're going to do that one as well as the other 3. So first, let's take a look at value. 259 mic. It's not uncommon for this unit to read higher than the stated value on the sleeve of the capacitor. And they tell you that in the manual, not so much the pull-out chart, but in the actual manual for this. Next thing we're going to do, let's get a second opinion on ESR. Comes back as 2.1 ohms and good. And then we'll do the dielectric test. %, also good. And then the final one we'll do is we will do the leakage test. Also coming back good. So we do have a capacitor here that clearly has some kind of a defect to it. And it is the same age as the rest of the unit, 40 plus years old. And we have 2 meters giving us the same diagnosis, which is the capacitor is good, even despite its physical problem. So I think we could all agree that this would be at least a very good second opinion. I don't know if it's the definitive statement, but I think we can all say that this is a pretty good piece of equipment for judging the health of a capacitor. So what I'll do is I'll leave capacitors at, there is varying opinions about them. Some say change all of them, and if you want to do that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In my case, I basically just locate what kind of problem we have, repair that problem, and I don't change anything that isn't really justified in my mind to be changed. But I don't have any problem with anyone changing every capacitor in any piece of equipment that you have if you want to do that. So, other than that, I did go ahead and get this window cleaned up. And so now we don't have any splatter in the window. So it's looking very clean, very clear. And this piece of equipment is beautiful condition, just beautiful. So I think we'll go ahead and get the top on, and we're going to do a final play test on this one, and we'll wrap it up. Well, as we bring to a close the Pioneer TX-608, as always, I want to thank you guys very much. I appreciate you checking out the video this week, as well as all the videos on the channel. And also want to thank Craig. I appreciate you sending this one up to me to have a look at. Absolutely beautiful condition. Easy to tell that it's been very well taken care of over its lifetime. And if you listen to my channel or watch my channel with any frequency, you've probably heard my innuendo towards the state of FM radio these days. It's unfortunate that the large corporations that own FM these days have decided that focus groups and corporate executives will decide which songs we listen to from which albums. But that's why I haven't been a frequent user of FM in many, many years. Basically choosing just to make my own radio station out of playlists from Spotify or from my own music collection. So as we get ready to finish this one up, we're going to leave on the same album we entered with, the Animals record from Pink Floyd. And I think pretty much appropriately enough, we're going to listen to the song Dogs. So as always, thank you guys very much, and I appreciate you checking out the video this week.
your toes. And when you're on the street, you got to be able to pick out the easy meat with your eyes closed. Then moving in silently downwind and out of sight. You got to strike when the moment is right without thinking.